G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War update for the 11th of July 2026. I will not apologise for bringing news from both sides of the war. It's the only way to know what the Russians are thinking and to help understand what they're planning. But NPCs, mostly Ukrainian glazers with no experience whatsoever in the real world outside of their Call of Duty bubble, have no idea how the real media works because they're so used to state media and they think linear, not lateral. They try to. It's like me, the bee, trying to explain to the fly why shit is shit. I'm bringing you honey, folks, and you know it. But they did pick up some new viewers. So here's the map. But before we get to the map, let's move the map and let's look at the media landscape. Because quite frankly, I have often said both sides are as bad as each other. But before we begin, let you know, none of my videos are viewed in Russia because my videos can't be viewed in Russia. And I'm pretty sure, despite the fact that many Russians use VPNs, that it's mostly state-dominated anyway. And it's the same in Ukraine. They can't. Many are forced to use VPNs to try and bypass the wall, but I tell you, it's like China. Most of those VPNs are monitored by the state. They wouldn't allow them to exist otherwise. You even see in the terms of service for your VPN, by the way, there are little hidden clauses here and there for state cooperation. And by Chinese law and Russian law and by Ukrainian law, these VPNs have to hand over their keys. It's the same with the fight over Telegram. While Russia wanted Telegram to remain free and independent, secretly behind the scenes, they were trying to control Telegram within the Russian Federation. So don't tell me what I do and do not know. And here's the thing you don't know about Ukraine. They don't obey their media landscape laws, even though their media landscape laws are heralded by Europe as the most open and transparent. I'll get to that shortly. Ukraine's media landscape is heavily centralized, regulated, and controlled since February 2022. Media control, major TV outlets are centralized. They have a centralized single government financed messaging 24/7. They're under heavy regulation. Despite independent media and investigative journalism and unfiltered Telegram channels, the public broadcaster continues to operate independently. But the pluralism, all the source of their news comes from the Ukrainian state with military censorship. And it's the same in the Russian occupied territories. And this comes from a report by Reporters Without Borders, funded by the EU. This was an EU study. And this same EU study pretty much outlined the same level of censorship, ranking both Russia and Ukraine below 50. That means heavily censored. This is, again, Reporters Without Borders, not Ukraine, not Russia, EU-produced report. The closest we get to independent human rights organizations is the Global Campus for Human Rights. They are funded by the EU and many other organizations, but it's primarily EU. And they point out that independent media fled to Russia to avoid censorship in Ukraine. Now, the Russian law is slightly different from the Ukrainian law. See, in Russia you can report on the war as long as you are independent. But you're not allowed to criticize, but at the same time, you're not allowed to criticize Now, I think there are provisos, right? You can't challenge any of the narratives, right? So Russia says, but you see in non-Russian state media, that's why I cover multiple sources, the Ministry of Defense claims. See, they are telling you, do you trust the source? Yes or no? And we know Russia never reports 100% of the time every event. Nor does Ukraine, nor does the BBC, nor does any news organisation. The global media landscape is polluted, that the vast majority of news is fragmented. Now, it becomes propaganda when, and this is how propaganda primarily works, by the way, is to omit bad news. And Ukraine admits a ton of bad news. So don't tell me the Russian state media is propaganda when all media is propaganda, when all art is propaganda. Manoa. The Rock actually said, I wanted to make a movie so brown people will look up and go, I want to be him. That's propaganda. Propaganda does not mean news that you do not like. Propaganda is news to change opinions. I do not produce news to change opinions. I present the facts. I give you my opinion. And I do not respect anyone who just comes to my channel to troll, because you are propaganda. And you can't recognize this as propaganda, but it is the closest we have to independent media source. It is not compiled by the Ukrainian state like other outlets, although it is compiled by Ukrainians. Other outlets are popular because they're broadcasting Ukraine, and Ukraine is a very news-starved country, and they are part of the Ukrainian community around the world. So they have an unfair advantage over me, in that they are known to Ukrainian and known to produce pro-Ukrainian propaganda, and Ukrainians love to have their balls licked by the media. That's why we have, and it's the same with all the left around the world. All the left love to be told what good people they are. They love to be told they're winning. They love to be told they're intellectuals. They love to be told they're the majority. They love to be told they're right. They love to be told how perfect they are. They're so loving and tolerant until you disagree with them. So channels like mine are not permitted to grow. They're not permitted to have a wide audience. They're not presented to a wide audience, and I'm treated by shit like by the liberal community. That's not loving and tolerance. That's intolerance. And it's extreme. And therefore, everything liberals like is automatically propaganda because it's approved by people who only want to be told they're good when they're not. Good people are not pro-war. And the same people who are against the Vietnam War, the same people who were against the Vietnam, Korean, screamed about the invasion of Panama, who hate on the military action in Iran and Venezuela, love the military action in Ukraine. That means they don't have morals, they have politics. And they only care about political agendas. And if they cared about a new rules-based order, why then do they care about a country that flaunts and breaks every rule, even their own laws? Now, as we look around the map, we know, right? We know Ukraine targets Russian gas and oil. And Russia is doing the same. Russia is in a mode of retaliation. They have Their entire strategy in this war is retaliation. Ukraine may be on a winning formula with the fuel wars because Russia can't cut off yet Ukraine from fuel. While Ukraine, because it has the European and American might behind them, can cut Russia off from its fuel. Ukraine is not a strong, brave country. It is the little... oh, what's that? It's the mouse that roared. And that roar is only powerful because it has the lion standing behind it. That's not bravery. That's cowardice. Hiding behind others to fight your battles. Now, one of the reasons why so many countries are involved in Ukraine is to bolster their own defense. Because what better way to know your military weapons work is to put them into a war against the very weapons they are facing. South Korea puts weapons into Ukraine. Why? Because they're facing Russian weapons in North Korea. And it's the same with Taiwan. Ultimately, the majority of Chinese weapons are going to be Russians. We all seen it. The Chinese T-10, the Chinese T-40. Now, there are some, like the Type 99, which worked for a while, but then when they stepped up production, they collapsed. BYD, their vehicles, their, I forget the name of their armored car, Russia stopped buying them. So China retaliated yesterday by withdrawing from the Russian stock market, which caused a decline in the Russian stock market for the first time in 9 months. Why is that? Why is China isolating Russia? Well, immediately all the speculators raced in, but you always give news cycles time to mature, and you actually find out the truth. Russia stopped buying equipment because it's breaking down or not performing as specified, or basically shit. Temu, Russia stopped buying, not everything. They just stopped buying from certain companies. But they, being powerful state enterprises, have decided to use the power of the state to retaliate against Russia, to try and force them to buy more Chinese equipment. But Russia's realizing that its dependence on China is weakening its economy because of the huge outflows of cash. Russia is trying to fight this war on a budget, and in order to slim down its budget... Now, I remember, and I don't think a lot of you do, so it doesn't matter, at the end of the Cold War, one of the things that caused the collapse of the Soviet Union was poor workmanship. Right? You can mass produce things, and they only as long as they work, right? They don't have to be the best, right? Now, that doesn't mean you make the worst. Unfortunately, standards in Russia, in order to meet higher and higher production quotas, but these imaginary production quotas were producing goods like shoes, like they had entire factories dedicated to making a left shoe. No one could figure out where the other factory was. But because it was for the officers, it was a state secret. But no one checked, and they did not find out for years that the other factory had ceased production long ago. So these huge stockpile of shoes in military warehouses with only one shoe. Now, originally it came from a shortage of shoes. But state enterprises are run by people with communist mentalities, whether they be in the West or the East. Whether they be the state media of Kiev or the state media of Russia, or the state media of China, or ABC, they have the same mentality. My job is secure. My job is to keep my job. It's like the head of Disney. The head of Disney is not about entertainment. The head of Disney doesn't even run the company. They run the board, and they do their best to stay in that job. So they're not interested in the quality of the product. They're interested in the quantity of product, so that they can go to the board, so they can go to the shareholders and say, look at all this we produced. But the difference between transparency is the difference. And right now, there is no transparency in Kiev. If I wanted to know what this target was, they decide, not me. The Times of Ukraine and other sources, someone in Ukraine decides whether or not I know there was an explosion in Dnipro, or an explosion in Odessa, or an explosion in Kharkiv. So don't lecture me whatsoever what I do and do not know. And I'm telling you, these NPCs, they do not have your best interest at heart. They have their interest at heart. They want to be glazed. They only want to hear good news. They only want to hear that they're winning. They only want to be told what good little boys and girls they are. And most of them don't even know if they're a boy or a girl, because they are so low IQ, so degenerate. They can't accept who they are, and yet they want to tell you to accept them as they are, when they don't even know what they are. And they are NPCs. They're following fads for approval from higher authorities. And when someone doesn't oblige them, when someone breaks from the herd and says, no, I am not going to repeat state media. I'm going to analyse. And I'm going to recognise that these combats, after months and years of seeing the same combat, that yes, for now, we can assume the Russians are engaged in a border alteration, a buffer zone. And it strategically makes sense. That the strategy behind Kupiansk doesn't make sense until you realise that it's a designed killing field, a bear trap to lure Ukrainians into their death. The same here, the same little temptation. Force Ukraine to panic, divert 15,000 or 10,000 soldiers off other duties, pulling up to 50,000, all these little operations. Each pull hundreds, and those add up to thousands, and eventually tens of thousands off the front. Diverting logistics. And the Russian grind. They grind away and they don't advance until the Ukrainians are forced to give up those positions. It's a psychological strategy. It's based on one thing. Once they give up a position, the Russians believe they will not want to come back. And maybe 6 out of 10 times they don't come back. And the Russians are advancing on Mykolaiv. They are increasing their hold on other territories around it. And I said, often this will be their last attack. It's not up to me to tell Ukraine how to win the war. I've told you many times that they can do it. And they may actually have a winning strategy with their fuel wars. Because fuel is one resource, even though Russia has. Ukraine hasn't. The advantage is Ukraine doesn't need to process fuel. It's all given to them. They don't have to buy fuel. It's all given to them. So, and it's spread out. It's such a wide distribution network that Russia literally cannot target all fuel transports because they're all small. It may be inefficient and unprofitable, but it doesn't have to be profitable because they're not paying any money for it. So they can burn lots of fuel at your expense and drag your economy down. And the Ukraine war, not Iran, is why the fuel price went high. When Ukraine destroyed 12 tankers, that Iran only destroyed one. And when they destroyed one, it was headed for China and had no impact on the fuel price. You're all being deceived by state propaganda. Which is why so many of my friends are disappointed in Trump. The lack of transparency, not standing up to Ukraine and its lies. And the EU seems to be willing to destroy its own fuel shipments. Let its own fuel shipments get destroyed. Now, for some reason, and don't know if this is relevant, but Russia has decided to move forward here before knocking over this is considered one combat area. For now, Ukraine is not reporting any combat north of this in this area. Not any bombings. They're not reporting any Russia. They have reported and put out, I think they're called yellow notices in Ukraine. They got warnings all the way up in this area about Russian infiltration. Same in here. So, and they put up these yellow warning signs. Russia does the same, but in difference. They have warning signs on all these roads. You see a yellow warning sign in Russia, it might as well be a stop sign because you go too far and your vehicle just suddenly stops existing. Where, at least in Ukraine, you'll most likely only get a gun in your face. Russian security is more paranoid than at the moment. So there are differences. Now, the offensive of Dnipro seems to have come to a halt and focusing on other areas. Again, we've seen photos from Al Jazeera and many other sources. They are often the same photo, but presented differently. But overall, there is an increase in troops from Russia, and we'll see over the next coming days more red. Because for now, and I'm pretty sure I've explained this before, when there's a troop rollover, first line, second line, third line. Second line goes to first line. They can stay up there for up to 2 weeks before the first line goes to the third line. Now, the third line will move up to the second line, actually. So you've got first line now in the second line, right? Third line now in the second line. So you now got second line in the first line. And the third line has now been filled up with new recruits. Now, the first line the former first line will now go to third line. They will start training those incoming recruits. So out of a rotation, 6 weeks on each line, plus 3. So you got 6 weeks on the front line, 3 weeks on the second line, 3 weeks on the third line. So you're being so there's rotations going all the time. So there are actually 4 front lines. But eventually, for about a 1 week period, that first line, that former first line starts trickling out. But the replacements are coming in bigger waves, which means they are increasing. which means we are most likely going to see maybe in next month's report 720,000, and we'll see what the Ukrainians have increased to, because usually Russia only increases the size of its army. Well, the last 3 times anyway that we can directly correlate was the fact that Ukraine increased the size of its army. But we have noted in various reports the size of the Ukrainian foreign army. Well, they're down to 16,000. So all you pro-Ukrainian flag wavers, good news. Ukraine's recruiting. They want to bring that number up to 50,000. You love Ukraine so much? Go. They love you. They'll pay you to be a pro-Ukrainian. So, good news, eh? No? You don't want to go? Yeah, that's what I thought. You just want... See, most people only support Ukraine because they think they're making the right-wing Germans upset. Ooh, you're all pro-Russian, so we're going to be pro-Ukrainian. See, they don't get to know you. They make assumptions about you and then act out on those assumptions where you are the worst person in the world, where you're a Nazi and a pro-Russian, which doesn't make sense because the Ukrainians are Nazis and they're definitely not pro-Russian. And the Nazi Party used to be the Social Democrats, and before that the German Workers' Party, and before that the Liberal Democrats. So, yeah. And they were started by was it half or quarter Jew? Drexel. Yeah. Hitler's friend was Jewish, by the way. So, yeah. Everything doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense. It's because it's politics. Politics makes strange bedfellows, remember. It makes people brain rotted because they don't act on morals or consistency or consistent action. They act out often on their paranoia and fears. And so far, all we're seeing on the Ukrainian map, by the way, is very little movement reported, which contradicts other maps. So is this map worth keeping? I'm going to have to do another comparison. But when I do comparisons, it tends to match the Sputnik map, which means, are they mirroring the Sputnik map and just putting on the... But they're putting on a brave face about Kostakovia not updating it. But again, as I explained, that's Ukrainian law. They're not allowed to contradict the Ukrainian government, or they lose their broadcasting license. It's the same in Russia. Sputnik, whether or not they want to, they can't contradict. So right now, you have two sides staring at each other, conducting the same lie. All to misdirect you. So you don't know where the Ukrainian war is going. And ultimately, we do know it's headed. Now, Trump is yet to put pressure on Russia. Real pressure, like they are with Iran. We'll hear whether or not Iran is going to keep its word. But Iran and Russia are putting out definite propaganda, which is indicating that Iran is preparing for a fight. And why is that? Well, because China wants to study US response. They didn't get the US response in Ukraine, so they're trying. That's why we have problems with Iran. If you can't figure that out, then I can't help you. Everything comes back to China right now and its desire to dominate the world, which is why they flooded Iran, which is why they flooded Ukraine initially with weapons back in the late 90s. And despite Russia's warnings for 10 years, America in 2014 decided to back a coup in Ukraine. Now, again, the EU is only a facade. They've done nothing about sex trafficking in 20 years. No significant arrests, no reduction in sex trafficking whatsoever. So there you go. You want state media lies? Look at the damning report into rape and child sexual abuse. The media cover-ups there. So don't attack me when you're protecting the BBC, the biggest producer of brainwashing and brain rot propaganda. Me, I'm funded by you, the viewing audience. Empire Vels. Empire Vels, one word, .myshopify.com. Your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing, of course. Now, there was a ballistic and missile attack. Now, why was there no air raid warning? Because on this day, Russia either accurately, and it's possible that they either accurately calculated or predicted, or just by sheer coincidence, hit the right radar window. Because don't forget, radars can't be on all the time. They need to be shut down to be worked on. They successfully jammed it, or it came in on a blind spot, which is, again, did they successfully calculate that blind spot or just coincidence? Doesn't matter. What was hit? A fuel station. We know it's a fuel station by the signage, the burnt out signage. Although that could also be the supports of, although, these are small office. Now, the biggest worry and concern. Now, they say Russian hackers. How do they know they're Russian hackers? Russia, like North Korea and China, do have hacker units. Most of those, though, operate within the broader community and hire people to carry out. But they, and they actually admit here that it was state-backed. Yeah, hired mercenaries, systematically compromised internet connections in the Ring network. And what's the Ring network? Remember Google Ring? Cameras on your doorbell. Now, a small number of them were directly facing military logistic routes in the Netherlands. And those cameras were found and compromised. Even though the intelligence agencies were warned about compromise. And default passwords is probably the biggest. Outdated software, how does that work? Well, often companies build in backdoors. They call them test nodes. This gives them access to the entire machine and everything, which gives them the password. So don't tell me your phone can't be unlocked, because they do know how to unlock your phone. They just won't do it without a warrant. So you can't go into your phone company and get your phone unlocked. But go out and commit a felony and the feds will gladly unlock your phone for you. Isn't that weird, eh? Now they can read your memory anyway on all your devices, externally anyway. The American government particularly has put billions of dollars into various technologies. Without breaking NDAs, I can tell you they have a camera that can look at like a speed camera, but they point it at your computer and they can read your screen. Having worked in security and seen like security camera banks, and you wonder how the security guards, they don't seem to be paying attention. They're just sitting back. Yeah, it's because they're so trained by the blur They're just looking for abnormal, anything that's different, and they'll focus on it. So don't think that. And this is just traffic, by the way. That's the same thing. They just they start with small. They start with small and they build up to working with big ones. But yeah, state-sponsored hackers. Israel does it. Ukraine does it. They all do it, and they often overlap. And often, yeah, they use the same. Yeah, they use the same all across. And Ukraine did it with Russia to pick their targets. That's how they found. No, yeah, the that officer they from Crimea, the pilot who they attacked in Kursk. They're all hacking into each other and they're all monitoring each other. And the difference is Ukraine doesn't have to pay its bills. And that's at racking up a hidden debt in Europe. And that European security, and this is what they call the secret budget, which is why Ursula is under investigation, it'll all go away soon. No one's going to be punished for diverting funds away from European security to Ukraine. But Russia's claiming, note these words, claiming. Now, it has to be at least 150, but it could be as many as 200. And I would say, yeah, there you go. With no information. Just, yeah, they do know at least the 43 in the 10-day period of reporting in July this month. Now and again, and this is going from open source, you can find that, yeah. Remember, Google Maps and other companies, the overhead satellite maps, which you can get if you subscribe, which I haven't. I can't afford it. I asked if my audience wants it. No one funds it, so no one gets it. What Koshnikovia looks like now, I've shown you several pictures, but if you go looking up Koshnikovia, you'll see what it used to look like, and it was a very beautiful city, well, town, by my standards, of 120,000. It was, and half of Kiev is also empty facades, often with blown out windows painted over or boarded over. Often the boards are painted black to, yeah. Yeah. They claim, again, you wouldn't know what they're claiming if you didn't read their news, that the civilian gas stations are warehouses and dispensaries for the Ukrainian military. And we've seen at least twice, particularly with the Battle of Kursk, Ukrainian convoys filling up at civilian gas stations and using them as logistic points. So now you know why a gas station, no matter how poorly it does, may not close. Allegedly. Russia set new terms for ending the war. You wouldn't notice from Western media. You can say this is propaganda or misinformation when this is a direct message from Russia to Ukraine, telling them that if you don't, it's the same as America. But Trump, he doesn't talk to the Ayatollah. He puts out a tweet calling him a dickhead and says, hey, hey, dickhead, if you don't stop your shit, we're going to blow you up. And they get on state media and say, Trump's rhetoric is unpresidential. And Trump just has a laugh and says, gotcha. because Trump is trolling. And he loves your tears. He loves the outrage. The more the merrier. The redder you get, the more he wins. So Putin is trying to play the same game now. That the settlement with blood and gunpowder. Now, it seems that you can only thank the foreign sponsors who did not actually protect them. This is the end game stuff, and this is, of course, the bluster of a Russian senator. Probably not, but documents are on the table. We're seeing this from Iran. We're seeing this from Ukraine. We're seeing this all around the world. This is every country tries to hide its. Almost every country, it's called the pufferfish, right? Pufferfish is is the minnow of the deep sea. Often called a sunfish, there are various varieties. They go around their merry way eating plankton. But unfortunately, everything else wants to go around eating flesh, particularly them. So what happens is every time they encounter a predator, they puff up to look big. And in the distortion underwater, the fractional distortion actually makes them look even bigger than they really are. And some of them can puff up, really big. And the older they get, the bigger they can puff and stay puffed. And a lot of sharks, because they can't hover, will swim away. But octopus, nah, they've learnt to squeeze, and they love squeezing them pufferfish. Octopuses are as smart as humans, according to some scientists, and people have been exploring how to turn them into pets to save them from extinction, because the Chinese are wiping out octopi around the world. Yeah, it's sad. The animal species can't sit in its native habitat because of the insatiable appetite for Chinese to overpopulate and mass consume and overconsume. They'll kill they kill twice as much food as they need, simply in their mad dash to control markets. So, new terms, what are they? Don't ask, because Ukraine ain't telling, and I think this is bluster. But it's important for you to know that we're reaching the point where both Russia and Ukraine are pufferfish staring at each other, each thinking the other is each accusing the other of what they've done to each other. But Russian strike, again, you wouldn't know this. What is their thinking? They believe they're targeting military cargo transports. Ukraine will never admit the truth, so how can you call it state propaganda? This is Russia trolling Ukraine. And why do I report it anyway? Because it helps. Over time, it forms patterns. And when you start to see the patterns, where they do tell you what they've destroyed. And then weeks later, sometimes you find out what's true or not, and you can develop patterns to see where the war is going, what their targets are. Now, obviously, Russia knows this. Russia hits logistic points that are sacrificial lambs. Ukraine knows they cannot 100% defend all logistic points. So they have to give Russia targets for Russia to shoot at, while they play a shell game with their car deliveries of personnel, medicine, food, water to the front line. So Russia has to divide its targets between hard targets and soft targets. The hard fixed targets are easy, but they're hard to get to, so they cost more drones than a soft target. But they can't get all soft targets because they're spread out over, look at all the roads. And you can imagine all the off-roads and all the vehicle traffic on these roads between cities. So they have to lie in wait and could wait hours. So they have to divide up. And the thing about it is, this is why knowing each other's production levels is so important. So they can calculate things on big diagrams and go, right, this is how we're going to spread out our vehicle deliveries. It may be inefficient, but 200 cars go out, 100 come back, and they keep organising it until they get the most amount of cars back, and that means sacrificing warehouses, but they can't sacrifice too many warehouses, so they put 300 cars out there, knowing that they can't defend these roads, because if they defend anything too heavily, then Russia makes it economical to start hitting air defences. So Russia wastes also a lot of Ukrainian air defences with big, slow-moving drones like the Gurhan or Jihad or whatever to draw in missile fire, or slow-moving Janan 3 cruise missiles that are just pumping out flares, making it look like it's a big bomb, when in fact it's just pumped, loaded full of electronics to lure air defences into hitting it. So war is far more complicated than just who's wearing a white hat and who's wearing a black hat. It is psychological shell game. And every so often, Russia takes a stab at Ukraine's soft underbelly and strikes them extrajudicial measures. Militia was the police or militia. It's not clear which. Was people rioted in Lviv about the draft, and they were forced to. The rioters were arrested, held overnight, and in the morning forced to apologise to Ukraine for their behaviour. The video went viral on Tuesday, and so Russia is making fun of Ukraine for being a bunch of pussies, and yeah, this is all to make Zelensky have a hissy fit. And Zelensky is not one that's easily rattled, but many of his associates are. And Zelensky's quite the cool cucumber most of the time, but he does, and there are rare footages of him having a real hissy fit, a real blowout. He gets in the Ukrainian parliament and talks about dropping 10,000 bombs on Moscow. I wish I still had that clip. I should have kept that clip. But hard drive space is limited. And I didn't think that clip was worth keeping at the time. It's not a very good clip anyway. It's a little phone camera thing. I had no idea that it would be removed from the rest of the internet. Did Russia hit a secret mega arms depot? They hit a supply depot. One. They're but they hit it with a Flamingo. They hit it with, a Duran 4. Is it a copy of the Flamingo? Is the Flamingo a copy of a Russian missile? They're all copying each other. But they hit it hard. And they had it, and Russia did have a bigger explosion than they expected. A lot of the containers exploded. There was a huge explosion from one of the warehouses. This isn't the warehouse they hit. That's the one they hit. Look at their explosion and the explosion beside it. It's like the explosion at Lebanon a few years ago. One canister fell over and exploded. The problem is there was no blast war, and so all the chemicals in the other warehouse, well, other section of the same warehouse went off, and that's what's happened. They hit the warehouse, goes off, and then within not even in a second, the first explosion hadn't even finished and spread when the second one went off bigger. This is fuel. This is not just any fuel. This is rocket fuel. This is what they destroyed. Could have been at least a 100. No, I don't say 100, but enough fuel for 100 missiles. So definitely packs were destroyed, but only a shipment of packs, which about four pallets. So yeah, something fishy. And yeah, this was this plant belonged to Samsung 5 Point, Ukrainian partners in the production of the Flamingo missile. Even though the primary missile is made in Ukraine and France, but there are assembly points. There are Ukrainian technicians. Ukraine has a secret arms industry. That is, now, it's not uranium munitions. Uranium does not explode like that. That is a hydrocarbon explosion. The orange gives it away. It's the same petrochemical explosion as the Russian missile, which means that's a Duran 4, then that's that's fuel for the Flamingo, because they're similar to each other. Now, both the Flamingo and the Duran 2 are based on earlier European missiles, which are based on the V1 rocket. So they all use a high peroxide-based fuel. An early jet fuel was peroxide. Well, based on peroxide. Now, they're deliberately misreporting so that people in the know will out themselves like me and say, no, we know what it is. But what Russia's really looking for is people who know going to tell you, correct the record. It's a psychological ploy, right? Telling someone a lie in order for them to turn around and correct the record and say, no, this is what was at that site. I'm only guessing based on the explosion that is the primary explosion, and the following explosion, the secondary explosion, is much bigger because sympathetic detonation. But they actually tell you what happened. And guess what happened? The vulnerable volatiles were in a building without earth ramparts, concrete walls. Well, there's a certain type of roof you use when you're using explosions. They're rippled so that the shockwave crumples the roof, but they have a certain type of girder, which you find in petrol stations. Where's that image? Is that here? Oh, now I don't remember where it is. A certain type of girder. And once you see these girders and you know what they look like, it stopped. Oh no, here we go. It's working. But this isn't the image we got before. See, they're blurring it out. So Ukraine is open and transparent democratic society, folks. Blurring images out. Where is that? Is it there? I don't want to stop the video to go back and there it is. I was on the wrong place. See these girders with the triangular beams? What they do, well, this one's poorly put together because you'll see them You see these cross girders with triangular shells? They're all triangular. They use them at Shell and BP and many petrol stations. They're called explosive collapsing girders. But I don't know what their modern name are. But they were originally designed back in World War One, I think, for bunkers, for making ammunition. The whole idea is the girder. This is where impact and crumple zones come from. These girders, same with the roofs and heavy doors, fire doors. They're at least 2 inches thick. They're made of wood. They have they're filled with it should be shaved timber in a long, contiguous, curved pattern. I've seen it being made in. I used to work at a hardware company beside a huge timber mill, and I've seen them lathing timber into big curls to make door inserts for firewalls, fire doors. And why we're wearing grass? Because hard to catch fire to prevent spreading of fire. But for explosions, earthen wall, certain types of concrete walls, crumpled roofs, fire doors. Furthermore, they stored weapons, and they were storing weapons from imports and exports. Apparently, So yeah, why are they exporting? Well, those exports are not black market. We know now that Ukraine is a clearinghouse for interceptors going to the Middle East from Europe to make up stockpiles. That Germany, this is why Ukraine isn't getting a contract to make PAC-3s. They're getting in on an existing contract to put money in to get 600. So they've got to put in money and manpower to get 600 out of the packs that are made by Germany, by Samsung in Germany, in order to get a share of that market. It's a pre-existing contract that's been expanded. There is precedent that goes all the way back to when Britain was leasing a company that had been once German with warehouses and factories in former Czechoslovakia and former Yugoslavia in Serbia that had been taken over by the Russians. These small engines, these small turbofan engines, still in use today. This is why the Duran 2, the Flamingo have the same profile, because it's the same company. British Aerospace Corporation, BAC engines. You can look it up. During the Cold War, BAC engines were found in Yugoslav trainers and jets going to the Middle East. War is a complicated business, and it is a business. Now, war profiteering is supposed to be illegal. Now, remember, YouTube and others, and for non-compliance with Russian regulations, were shut down due to restrictions, VPNs. Yeah, even VPNs. There are alternatives and other platforms. But ultimately, my job is not to cuddle you, to coddle you, to kiss your boo-boos. My job is to give you, my chosen job is to write books, to study war. And as part of that study, to give you an unbiased opinion on the war, so that I can write realistic wars in the near future. I've worked on stories, and I often find, the most realistic stories are often sometimes the most also unbelievable. That it's unfathomable by most people's standards, because they think of wargaming, right? Where two sides line up, all their armies, and they skirmish. until the end. That's not how war works. People don't skirmish for hours on end either, or for all day. Battles rotate. People come in and out. If you watch, what is it, Hacksaw Ridge, that gives you at least some glimpse of, because they use some real battle footage. It's the same with Letters from Iwo Jima, where they showed controversially the battle from both sides, but they ended up making the most memorable and realistic war movie, showing you that by Iwo Jima you no longer had the fanatical Japanese, but rather scared young men who were fighting for their lives, believing that the Americans were coming to slaughter them. And so they couldn't believe it, how well treated they were when they were captured. And the few survivors had lived with a great regret they weren't able to save others, because the older fanatics would fight to the end when they realised that, hey, Iwo Jima's fallen, it's going to fall. There's twice as many warships in the harbour, with another 100 sitting back because they're not needed. When we've only got 6 ships. See, that mentality is gone. Ukraine is in a fight to the end mentality because they're all being urged on thinking you're great heroes. Where the Japanese by Iwo Jima were saying the most heroic thing is to stand up to our own side and say, no, we're not going to continue your madness. So the real heroes, yes, I'm not taking away from the real heroes who stormed the beaches, survived the machine guns, but there were heroes who were unsung, and those are the ones who stood up to the high command and said, no, I'm not going to fight your war. I'm going to surrender to the enemy because they're not my enemy. You're my enemy. You're killing me. You're forcing me to die so you can stay in power. And that is why the Letters from Iwo Jima is one of the most powerful war movies ever made. Not just because it's so realistic. And so Ukraine is going to have a lot of propaganda. And you watch. They're already filming the documentary. Glory, Ukraine. The Zelensky story. You watch. And I think Michael Moore is working on it. And they're going to... So don't tell me I don't know propaganda. Michael Moore is the biggest propaganda on the fucking planet. Well, actually, no. He's individually. And how many times have I said it? The best outcome for Ukraine is for them to end the war. Because then, what's Russia going to do if they continue the war? It moves the goalpost, doesn't it? It now shifts every focus and justifies everything Europe does, puts Russia in a worse situation and starts having the people question. Because I tell you, if Ukraine announces an end to the war, the news would spread like wildfire. It's the best thing Ukraine could do. It's a winning strategy. Stop the bleeding is the first priority of every doctor with a patient. So, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I'll be vindicated, so I don't care. These Ukrainian kiss asses, they'll just move on to the next thing to kiss ass. They can't be saved. You can't save fools and idiots, particularly the obtuse. They chose evil. You can't save people who choose evil. Because I've chosen neither Russia nor Ukraine. I've chosen my side. And neither of them are on my side. Thank you for understanding. Empire Valves, that's one word, not Yeah, Empire of Elves, that's my works, my story, my books. All my links are in the link tree. In my profile, QR code on the screen. Thank you. See you in the next video. Bye for now.